cold. Many of my favourite artists, both historical and contemporary, engage with the tradition of the self-portrait. Within my own practice, the self-portrait has emerged as a primary focus, both in my research and making. And so now I wish to investigate why this may be, by exploring the enduring significance of self-portraiture throughout art history, from the emergence of humanism all the way to the role of the tradition today. I am asking why self-portraiture emerged and why the tradition has prevailed so successfully amongst artists. To not make this video a million hours long, I will largely be focusing these questions around the works of Renaissance artists Albrecht Dürer and Artemisia Gentileschi as the basis of this research. Also, I did study German, and yes, I do struggle to say Albrecht Dürer. In his acclaimed book, Man and His Symbols, Swiss psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and founder of analytical psychology Carl Jung concludes that the one truly fundamental adventure for mankind is the exploration one must undertake within the unconscious realms of their inner psyche. 6 centuries earlier, Petrarch, the Italian scholar and poet of the early Renaissance, echoed a similar note, venerating the notion that the only acceptable preoccupation of man's thought should be of man himself. Now, whether you agree with that or not is up to you, and certainly progressive ecological movements of late are rightly challenging such a notion, that man is not the centre of the universe, but nonetheless, I digress. The major societal shift, which charged our seemingly modern desire for introspection and self-analysis, took root long before the psychological breakthroughs emblematic of the 20th century, long before Freud and long before Jung. In her book, Renaissance Self-Portraiture, The Visual Construction of Identity and the Social Status of the Artist, art historian Joanna Woods Marsden acknowledges that different cultures turn to modes of introspection at different times and to varying degrees. However, she surmises that the Western Hemisphere's fixation with self, capital S, was profoundly catalysed by the early seeds of humanism planted during the Renaissance, specifically the 16th century, a time she describes as the moment society truly began, and I quote, to view the internal self as an agent or subject. So for the sake of this video, I will only be focusing on a more Western scope. Maybe in a future one, I'd like to be able to focus on how different cultures reacted to this and how it developed across the world. But for the purpose of this video, it's Renaissance, so Western Hemisphere. For clarity, humanism is defined as a rationalist outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to humans rather than divine or supernatural matters. Characterised within the Renaissance as a waning interest in medieval scholasticism and revived interest in ancient Greek and Roman thought. American art historian and filmmaker Joseph Leo Korner reinforces this in his book The Moment of Self-Portraiture in German Renaissance Art, where he hails the greatest invention of the Renaissance to be the discovery of the individual self. This is no more evidently clear than in the works of German-born artist Albrecht Dürer, whose depictions of, and I quote, the limitless abundance of a most intricate and polymorphic inner self immortalised him as one of the revolutionary pioneers of self-portraiture. I'll be referring to Korner's writings throughout this video, specifically his work regarding Dürer, an artist whose practice Korner believes is emblematic of this pivotal societal shift in philosophical thought and art. What I also thought was interesting, and what's not in my notes, but I'd like to maybe look into it in another one of these videos, is a book I came across in my thesis. It's called Art and Physics. It's by Leonard Schlein. And basically what I took from this book is that Schlein tries to argue that each great movement of thought was preceded by a great movement of art. So for example, the early Renaissance inspired the early stages of humanism. Now, I have to look into it more because I only kind of glimpsed at it as part of my thesis research, but it's something, one, I'd like to get into my thesis as well in another video. I'd love to do a whole thing on that. But just regarding Schlein, I'd have to look into it more because I need to double check that is exactly what he's saying. But it is interesting because kind of what we're dealing with here is the early humanist movement in thought, but also the early Renaissance, and kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg. But according to Schlein, he says it's usually art that inspires thinking, and I'll get into maybe why that is in this video. Korner reveals that this time of revelatory introspection was the sowing of what was to become a long-withstanding tradition of self-portraiture for centuries to come, the fruits of which we are still reaping in the field of contemporary art today. One of the fundamental breakthroughs of the last century, which has proven instrumental in our understanding of subjectivity, is Jacques Lacan's mirror stage. This concept argues that from the moment an infant first encounters and recognises their reflection in a mirror, the human condition is destined to grapple with the notion that we are at once self and subject. Harking back to Adam and Eve's rupture of consciousness, the mirror stage marks a fundamental moment in what will become a lifelong journey to understand our sense of self. It is this arguably impossible feat that has bewitched the minds and pursuits of artists for centuries. How does one illustrate that which is inherently obscure? Based upon his writings within Man and His Symbols, Jung theorizes that when humans are faced with incomprehensible concepts, we use symbols as surrogates to represent that which cannot be formulated so plainly in words. Our minds have the potential to draw several meanings from a single symbol or icon. By unconsciously recognizing the subliminal connotations we as a society have applied to them over time. In this way, symbols have the capacity to convey multiple meanings at once, which aids an artist in their attempt to convey convoluted or inexplicable concepts, such as identity and religion, which show up throughout all of art history. Because it can condense things into something that we kind of feel rather than think, art becomes a force of dissemination. Religious beliefs and values can be subliminally injected into certain paintings, or when people were largely illiterate, the power of a symbol, the power of advertisement, the power of an icon. We usually don't notice this mental process happening in the moment, and when we do, we can't necessarily understand why or how specific iconography has the potential to conjure seemingly universal ideas, feelings, or impulses from the viewer. So how have people explained it? According to Jung, the answer to this is the collective unconscious. This is the unconscious part of the human brain that retains inherited concepts and ideas, not derived at the individual, but that we as humankind collectively share. Ideas which Freud named archaic remnants and which Jung has since coined archetypes. Jung implies this is an innate feature of the human mind that we have just become more disconnected from over time. That our instinctive modes of function are being overridden in favour of our evolved modern desire to rationalise our perception into that which is concrete and definable, as opposed to reactionary, instinctual, and with feeling. These symbols or icons are often employed by artists with an overarching mythological tale that the painting may be referencing. However, it is not the symbol or myth itself that is the archetype. These are merely, and I quote, conscious representations of the unconscious archetype, pulled from the depths of the collective unconscious. Joseph Campbell, a prolific author in the field of comparative mythology, reinforces this, defining myth as a projection of the depth wisdom of the psyche. Iconography and mythology therefore serve as vessels of these universal truths that we all have the potential to access and resonate with, ever evolving in appearance and meaning as they are recycled throughout time, shaped by the context of when and where they are developed. Immediately, an example that comes to mind is the statues of Isis and Horus that are found in ancient Egypt, and how much they bear resemblance to the Virgin Mary and Child that then we see in mainland Europe. Now, there's obviously an argument that one may have been taken or adapted from the other, and I think we know which is which, but also perhaps it's actually that both cultures were also just resonating with this archetypal image of a mother and child. So Mary and Isis aren't the archetypes, it's their cultural representations of the archetype, which is, in this case, the mother. Campbell believes the fundamental purpose of the mythological is to realign man with nature by tapping back into that which resonates with our primal and most archaic self. So this even goes back to what Jung was saying, that we have this disconnection from our inner selves over time as we've begun to intellectualize and rationalize ourselves as a society. He categorizes this throb of resonance as a component of affect theory, beyond the parameters of cognitive thought. Basically, that it's a reaction of the body and not the mind. Campbell states an affect image talks directly to the feeling system and immediately elicits a response, after which the brain may come along with its interesting comments. Ultimately, the image should induce a bodily response as opposed to an intellectual one. This gut reaction from within is imperative to an artist's success in their use of iconography and mythology. It is this instinctive resonance activated by the symbol or motif that allows visual art to operate as a universal language, to explore life's most unanswerable questions, transcending barriers of culture and education so that it's potentially accessible by all. However, this primordial recognition of archetypal content in an artwork is often more explicable to the viewer as a profound stroke of genius at the hands of the artist, who is sometimes even credited with accessing a God-given fundamental truth, as opposed to otherwise just revealing inherited remnants of the brain's collective unconscious, if Jung's correct in his theory of the collective unconscious. Regardless, iconography, symbolism, and mythology are transformative tools that can help an artist to confront themes and narratives that are concerned with some of life's most complex questions, such as who am I? These devices amplify the potency of an artwork, potentially even elevating the status of a self-portrait from something banal in creation, as a tool to mimic likeness, to an act of divine intervention in the artist's ability to confront the archetypal content of the subconscious self. In my opinion, this is scarcely seen clearer than in the work of Albrecht Dürer. In what became a playful irony between the role of artist as creator and notion of God, the almighty creator, is the German-born Albrecht Durer. Durer's self-portraits were some of the first to tread the boundaries between the making of art as an act of God and his sanctity to what subsequently became art making as an act of man and his agency. Joseph Leo Korner emphasizes this, regarding Durer as the principal propellant responsible for the rupture of the pre-Renaissance artistic tradition, spearheading the, and I quote, transformation of sacred into secular art. Throughout his work, Durer's portrayal of himself is intrinsically intertwined with the objective of claiming a higher status for the role of the artist in society. It is presumed this desire initially took root during his 1494 to 1495 visit to Italy, where he would have been first exposed to the concept of humanism. Humanism, in its most fundamental premise, addresses the agency of the individual and their quest for philosophical inquiry. And so it is no wonder this movement sparked such an affinity with the young artist, ultimately lending itself to the conception of Durer's new vision of what an artist's role in society should be. But what is an artist's role in society? According to Swiss analyst, author and co-worker of Jung, Aniela Jaffe, the artist has at all times been the instrument and spokesman of the spirit of his age. When applied to Jungian theory, the role of the artist is to then perhaps recycle and reinvigorate the archetypal images most relevant to their time of lived experience, that, and I quote, influence and characterize whole nations and epochs of history, in an attempt to represent the voice of not only them as an individual, but the shared collective of that generation or society at large. According to Korner, the feat of representing the self was proving to become more highly respected over the duration of Durer's life, with, quote, an increased self-consciousness about the fashioning of human identity as a manipulable art process. Artists such as Durer began exercising the omnipotence of the artist in their capacity and prowess to represent visually new identities and realities. Tom Dunn, the late Irish historian, author, and emeritus professor of history at University College Cork, reinforces this statement in his book, James Barrie, The Great Historical Painter, claiming self-portraiture specifically has the potential to fabricate or reinvent our perceived sense of self, allowing artists, quote, to fashion roles for themselves in which they can articulate a carefully crafted personal identity. This process is acutely portrayed in the early self-portraits of Albrecht Dürer, such as Self-Portrait 1498 and Self-Portrait at the Age of 28, made in 1500. The former, referred to by art historian Erwin Panofsky as the first indecent self-portrait ever produced, is a key example of Dürer's propensity to represent himself assuming different roles. As seen in Self-Portrait 1498, Dürer paints himself dressed as a fine gentleman, seen in the layers of luxurious fabrics coordinated in distinctive stripes of black and white. His glove-clad hands are firmly clasped in the lower right corner of the composition, capturing a sense of security and stability, reinforced by his straight posture and intensely set gaze. He is an image of dexterity and glamour, emblematic of the higher society he aspired to infiltrate as an artist. This painting is at once an assertion of his societal worth as well as a demonstration of his ability and freedom to fashion himself however he deems fit, regardless of whether it's true or not. As Korner admits, these works chronicle not so much one person's physical and artistic maturation as a sequence of roles enacted by the artist for a variety of occasions. The monogram and text featured within the painting reads, "This I painted after my own image. I was 26 years old," which is quite serendipitous, as today, as I'm filming this, is the last day that I will be 26 years old, so that's pretty nice. The artist's plain and clear statement declaring his title and intention supports the conclusion that the painting wasn't simply made to project a grander and more devotional message in line with the pictorial tradition hitherto, but instead a triumph of personal agency, an artist in pursuit of validation and credit for his craft. This is only further amplified in Self-Portrait at the Age of 28, which is one of my favourites, where Dürer correlates the turning of the century with his realisation of what it means to be an artist. In doing so, he is employing the momentous timing of the new century to reinforce and amplify the significance of this new epoch in his career, or even the career of all artists at large. Again, he clearly denotes his monogram with the painting's date of production central to the composition, branding his seal of authenticity. He is undeniably announcing his role as creator of this artwork. Though the garments he adorns are contemporary to Dürer's time, this self-portrait is harking back to a much older tradition within art history. Instead of portraying himself in a three-quarter view pose, popular during the Renaissance portraits of this time, Dürer opts for the older and flatter alternative of a front-facing self-portrait. This, in combination with the near-perfect symmetry of the composition, draws an explicit parallel to the historical representations of, bear with me for the Latin, imago Dei, the image of God, and according to Kerner, threatens the panel's simpler status as a portrait, the direct, solemn gaze of the subject's face, framed by cascading ringlets of long brown hair, are all features attributed to the Christian portrayal of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. These characteristics are likely derived from relics such as the Shroud of Turin, the cloth memorialised for seemingly bearing an imprint of Christ's face. It was common in Dürer's lifetime for artists to paint scenes displaying the image of Christ's face upon a cloth, in reference to the Holy Shroud of Saint Veronica. However, it wasn't until after the creation of Van Eyck's since-missing masterpiece, The Holy Face, which I will be making a video on Van Eyck at some point, but anyway, it wasn't until after the creation of Van Eyck's since-missing masterpiece, The Holy Face, made in 1438, that artists began portraying a prototype of Christ fully embodied as a living person. 60 years later, Dürer's self-portrait at the age of 28 marks the next development in the pictorial depiction of Imago Dei. Dürer transmits his own likeness upon the icon of Christ, which is essentially a modern representation of the creator archetype, portrayed through a Christian lens, possibly in an attempt to render an image of what a modern God may look like. In this case, it is the artist that assumes the role of God, with Dürer using his own face as the exemplum of both artist as creator and God, the almighty creator. This is presumably an intentional device to showcase how the artist's ability to imitate or reimagine reality in this way is comparable with the power of God, or at least a product of it. The legacy of Dürer as a milestone in the self-portrait tradition is keenly summarised in the following quote by Kerner, who concludes, "Whereas his self-portraits celebrate the artist as the irreducible subject of his works, Dürer's art theory confronts the dilemma, deeply modern in nature, of demonstrating the universality of the artistic self. If art is about the self, what interest does it have for other selves?" At its core, this question tackles the very premise of this video. Why does self-portraiture still resonate with contemporary artists today, and why should the viewer care? As I've just discussed, one explanation is credited with artists such as Dürer, specifically in Dürer's divergence from making strictly sacred art to the focus and subsequent elevation of man's agenda to the forefront of artistic pursuits. Before the likes of Dürer, devotional religious art was prioritised as a means to pay penance to God and disseminate religious beliefs and values. It was only after artists such as Dürer that art became a tool for the individual, though often still viewed as a product of God, due to the fact that the artist too was viewed as one of God's creations, and so their art was also derived from him. However, it certainly paved a path for the separation of the sacred and the secular. Philosophical pursuits could now be viewed beyond a religious lens. This shift ultimately made paintings much more accessible for the layman to identify with, projecting themselves upon the subject of the artwork. At a time in history when humanist thought was developing and more people were seemingly seeking individual agency, it is no wonder that a tradition such as the self-portrait emerged and prevailed. However, this is certainly not the only reason for our steadfast commitment to the tradition today. It is an understatement to say that art history and history at large often showcases a detrimentally limited and biased view of the world that exclusively prioritises the perspectives of those most powerful in any one given place. Therefore, it has been difficult to ascertain a comprehensive view of society at large in certain contexts, as everyone else's voices and faces were often not deemed worthy of documentation. Not everyone has been so clearly represented, credited, or even had the right to participate in the first place within the tradition of the self-portrait. As historically, not everyone has had the means or privilege to access an education within the arts at all. And obviously, You don't need me to tell you that. This especially applies to those of minority groups, based upon anything from cultural, ethnic, racial, religious, sexual, or physical differences to what society deemed normal, which for nearly all our recorded history also included the opposite sex: women. A conversation regarding the self-portrait cannot be sincerely had without acknowledging the critical lack of diversity within the painting tradition and artistic canon at large. So make sure to join back for part 2 of this video, where I will explore these conversations further, primarily through the work of legendary Artemisia Gentileschi, amongst much more. And Gentileschi is one of my all-time favourites. Her life story is fascinating, her paintings are incredible, and I'll be basing a lot of the research for Gentileschi around Katie Hessel's The Story of Art Without Men. She's amazing, and I can't wait to talk about her, but I need to finish this right now because this is being authentically filmed in an art studio which is freezing and my hot water bottle is no longer warm, so okay, I could